called agape. Agape is more than romantic love. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is not something affectionate. Agape is understanding, created, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. And when one rises to love on this level, he loves men not because he likes them, but he loves every man because God loves him. He's all wrong with that.
All right. So can you guys hear me okay if I don't use the microphone? So I sound way too monotone talking through this thing. If you can't hear me, let me know and I'll talk back through it. So as you heard here, King talks first about the term eros, which usually means kind of a romantic or erotic love. So we're attracted to the deep mystery in another person and seek communion with his or her mystery. We see this illustrated in poetry, love songs, and romantic films. Although a thicker description of eros would show that it's even more than just love, erotic attraction, sex, and those things. At the same time, this idea of eros connected to a more romantic affection will serve our purposes. Then as you heard, King went on and talked about what's called philia, which is a kind of friendship love. He says it's an intimate affection between friends or even among family. So if we think of the name of the city Philadelphia, which everyone's heard of, and the Greek means the city of brotherly love. Philia is at the beginning of that word, right? Or if we think about our closest inner circle of friends and what holds us together, this is what he means by philia. This is a mutual affection at the core of a relationship. Then King went on and talked about a third term, and this is the most important for our discussion today, which is agape. And King says that agape is not something affectionate. It is not an emotional connection, has nothing to do with liking somebody. King says that agape means that we love another person because God loves him or her. We recognize the spark of the divine, the image of God, carried by each and every human being. We realize that we must harmonize with God's Spirit and do two things. First, inflict no harm whatsoever on that person or violation of their dignity. This means both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then two, seek the creation of a better world through speaking to their conscience. So for King, no matter how far a person had gone in serving evil, they could always come back. There was always the possibility of redemption because they still retained some semblance of their basic humanity. This is why he was committed to the method of active, radical, nonviolent resistance to evil. For him, it was a weapon for the disenfranchised, those in society whose entire persons had been sinned against, and for them to declare their intrinsic worth, stand up, confront injustice, but do so in a way that inflicted no harm on another living creature. Now, there's a lot more that could be said about these different types of love, but again, for our small task here today, this understanding of love as agape will help set the table for us. So King has offered us understanding of love through the term agape, but he's not been helpful at all so far in helping us understand this question of enemy, right? Because love our enemies. The question becomes, well, who is my enemy? How do I even go about thinking about that question? Especially if we accept that this teaching of loving one's enemy is given by Jesus of Nazareth to his disciples now and throughout all ages, so that if we are of the Christian persuasion, then it's a command. If we're not, then it's helpful to understand, well, why is it that these crazy Christians think that they should go around loving their enemies? So the way I want to rephrase the question is this. To ask the question of who is one's enemy is neither to seek division nor to put a target on another person. Rather, it is not a stance of aggression, but rather one of social fact. One is not necessarily creating an enemy, but rather is acknowledging an unequal relationship in power and possibly manipulation that already exists. So I want us here to think about an enemy in the following way. The question is not, who is my enemy? Rather, the question is, what person or group's words, actions, or policies in our larger society and social structure are resulting in my feeling unwelcome, less safe, or less human? So in other words, am I being portrayed as an other or enemy against my will? And if the answer is yes, then who or what group is responsible for this, either intentionally or unintentionally? Because if I use this line of analysis, What emerges may be a revelation that some part of our society, and perhaps government, has put a target on people's backs and turned us into enemies against our will. That is, I've been characterized as an other who does not fit, is not welcome, and whose very existence may even be seen as dangerous to the status quo. Now, I've had no say in this matter. Nobody asked my opinion about it. But I wake up, smell the coffee, and realize that I now carry a false identity that I did not choose, and that is unfair. So, how King helped us understand this term love, there's another great thinker who can help us understand this question of enemy. And this is a man by the name of Howard Thurman, who was one of King's spiritual mentors. So in his famous book, it's called Jesus and the Disinherited. If anybody takes my summer session, Social Justice 2, this is one of our required texts. Small plug. He looks at Christianity as the religion for the disinherited. That is, those who, he says, have their backs against the wall. Those who have woken up, smelled the coffee, realize that society has given them a false, dehumanizing identity that they did not choose, and that is unfair. Those who are disinherited are not looking for trouble, and they're not trying to make enemies. But they take a sober look around them, see how they've been stereotyped or misrepresented, then they ask a simple question. Well, where did this come from? Who or what created the conditions for me to be seen as other, subhuman, or even dangerous? And to this end, Reverend Thurman gives us 3 different understandings of this term enemy. The first he talks about is the personal enemy. This is usually what we think about. We think about somebody who I've wronged or who has wronged me. Somebody who I have an interpersonal problem or conflict with. It could be someone I don't like who's betrayed my trust. I've betrayed their trust, but there's been some break in what originally was a kind of philia, friendship, family, or other positive relationship. They tend to be in the same social situation, and so the way to love one's enemy, personal enemy, is through reconciliation. It is through seeking to reestablish the relationship on renewed grounds of trust and affection. So, as we're defining our terms, this idea that personal enemy is the one we're going to put on the table. It is not the understanding that we're working with for the next hour or so. So Thurman then moves on and talks about another type of enemy. The enemy as someone whose behavior makes it difficult for a group to live without shame or humiliation. Now let me give you an example, and this is what Thurman talks about. If we think way back when to the time when Jesus was alive, and in this context, the Jewish people were in their homeland, and they were being occupied and subjugated by the Roman Empire. So they were in their homes and they were being controlled, manipulated, coerced, and under the rule of a foreign power. So this is the situation. And we've all heard about the tax collectors during this time. Now, the reason why the people didn't like the tax collectors wasn't just because they were taking money. It's because the tax collectors were Jewish people who were exploiting their brothers and sisters, squeezing as much as they could get out of them in order to pay off the Romans, but then also make a living for themselves. So their very survival and well-being depended upon the suffering of their own people. So Thurman goes on and says to love this sort of an enemy is not to condone their way of life, but to speak to their heart. It is to remind them that he or she is a child of God, needs to serve good and not evil. It works on the person's conscience and empowers them to make a change from the inside out. Now Thurman goes on and offers a third category of enemy. This is what I'm calling here the quote-unquote political enemy. Now to be clear, this does not mean somebody who disagrees with me on policies, politics, Republican, Democrat. Political doesn't mean somebody who's of the opposite political party necessarily. Because when it comes to politics, disagreements should happen among friends, family, colleagues, and government officials, because that's how we seek the common good, through robust debate, through robust discussion. So a political enemy isn't somebody who disagrees with me. Rather, a political enemy is one who lives in such a position of power to the extent that their privilege is connected to another's dehumanization. That is, they're part of a larger system that is making somebody feel other, unwelcome, or dangerous. And again, to go back to Thurman's example about the Romans and the Jews in the time of Jesus. Thurman says that the Romans were the enemies of the Jews because the Romans had conquered and subjugated the Jewish people and made them second-class citizens, subhuman in their own land. So a Roman citizen's very identity as a Roman was based upon the fact that a Jewish person had to be a second-class citizen. They're intertwined. A Roman couldn't have Roman citizenship and a self-understanding without it being at the expense of the people that they were subjugating. To give a more contemporary example, if you look at the system of legal segregation in the South in the U.S., when whites were the enemies of African Americans. So in a similar way, not identical, but similar, the legal status of white citizenship was connected to the disenfranchisement of African Americans. Whites had more access to money, political power, and sense of contentment, and enjoyed these oftentimes at the expense of the black community. So in this case, in this category, Thurman points out that loving one's enemy means attacking the system that has created his or her status as an enemy. He says that they have to emerge from their respective roles as superior and inferior to becoming merely and fully human in each other's presence. As he points out, quote, once an attack has been made on the enemy's status and the individual has emerged, the underprivileged man or woman must himself or herself be status free. In either case, this kind of love is only possible between two freed spirits. And then he goes on, I continue to quote, each person meets the other where he or she is, and once there, treats that person as if he or she was where they ought to be, unquote. So for our purposes here, we're going to be focusing on those last two understandings of enemy, not the interpersonal enemy, but the idea of enemy in a more socio-political context. Okay, so before we move from this very abstract discussion of what is love and what is an enemy, these categorizations and descriptions, to our context now, I need to offer one word of caution. Although Jesus does indeed teach Christians like myself to love our enemies, should we accept this teaching uncritically? Is it advisable for a person who is vulnerable to love their enemy who wields more power and has their well-being protected by culture, society, government, and sometimes even military force? Now it is here that the philosopher Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, offers a critique. Although Malcolm X's father was a Christian minister, X himself was a proud and practicing Muslim. Like many of his time, he saw Christianity as little more than the white man's religion used to mentally, physically, and spiritually enslave those of African descent in the U.S. He had no difficulty identifying how whites were his enemy, and he had good reasons to do so. So in his philosophical capacity as a skeptic of Christianity, and this teaching of love your enemy, X taught that African Americans, so those who Howard Thurman would say are the disinherited, who have their backs against the wall, should not offer love to their enemy in the sense of agape. Rather, Malcolm X gave a different understanding of love. And I'm going to show a very short excerpt from a longer speech where he's going to make clear what he means by love.
And what you and I have to let the man know is we are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us. We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us. But we are not nonviolent with anyone who is violent with us. Once those intentions are made known, we can get to the nitty-gritty of the problem.
All right, so as you saw in this short clip, Malcolm X says that he's a peaceful person, he's a loving person. He loves everyone who loves him, but he will not love anyone who doesn't show love to him. He says he's nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with him, but he will not be nonviolent with anyone who shows violence to him. So instead of this idea of agape love, Malcolm X is teaching self-love, and that is actually the enemy who should be the one showing a type of agape love. Nonviolence, although a nice idea, for Malcolm X would not change the relationship between blacks and their political enemies. Invoking the universal human right of self-defense was the only tactic that could speak the enemy's language, in his opinion. Now, although I don't have time to go into Malcolm X's philosophy in more depth, and for another shameless plug, you can take my class on Martin King and Malcolm X to find out a lot more. It's important to remember that if we're Christian, non-Christian, as we're approaching this question, we don't need to automatically accept the command of love of enemy uncritically. Okay, so now it's about time to get down to what we're up to today. So I'd like to conclude by bringing this discussion of love of enemy into our contemporary situation, and then I'm going to pass it on to our three esteemed student panelists. So even though the purpose of this forum is to investigate the Christian claim to love one's enemy, it is not an explicitly political forum to register likes and dislikes, score any political or ideological points, or push forward any agenda. We can only investigate a question within a context. And our context is this. Accompanying the candidacy in now the early days of the administration of President Donald J. Trump have been voices coming up from society that violate human dignity, that previously had been pushed into hiding but are now beginning to reemerge, and reemerge with vigor. Whether it's talk of grabbing women by their private parts, identifying Mexicans with rapists, promoting fear of Muslims, or the coming out of the closet by white supremacists as proudly alt-right. Voices of dehumanization of finding both a platform from which to speak and an audience willing to listen. Sadly, this kind of public discourse portrays all kinds of fellow American citizens and residents as enemies. Many women and men who seek nothing more than life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, an opportunity for themselves, their families, and their loved ones, are encountering a newly hostile social and political context. People are being portrayed as enemies against their will and through no fault of their own. So I bring us back to our very simple, seemingly simple question. What do we do with this Christian command to love one's enemy? And again, to reiterate, to ask the question of who is my enemy is neither to seek division nor to put a target on another person. It is not a stance of aggression, but rather one of honesty and social fact. One is not necessarily looking for an enemy or even creating an enemy, but is acknowledging an unequal relationship in power and possibly manipulation that already exists as a social fact. So as we continue, I want us to think about an enemy in the following way. So first, what words, actions, policies in society are resulting in your feeling unwelcome, less safe, or less human? In other words, are you being portrayed as an other or enemy against your will? And if the answer is yes, then who or what group may be responsible for it, either intentionally or unintentionally? And then second, do you think that your response should be to love that group? If so, what do you mean by love and what does it look like? Does it include nonviolence? If some kind of love is not the best option, then what is the best option? So it's with these two questions in mind that I turn it to our three esteemed panelists. And I've chosen these three very intelligent young women because I've had them in a number of classes. We've had discussions on Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, love of enemy, politics, and all kinds of different nuances of this very question. And all three have very insightful words to offer us that we can all learn from, myself included. And so here's how we're going to proceed. I'll introduce each student. She will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, more or less. And then after each student has spoken, I'll come back up here and start to facilitate a discussion on this idea of loving our enemy. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first student panelist. And this is Ms. Mariana Portela Barragan. And she is a senior at CCSJ and is a major in biomedical science and psychology. So please give Ms. Barragan.
Hi everyone. Well, most of you know me. My name is Mariana. I'm from Mexico. And well, when Dr. Considine first asked me these questions of what works, actions, policies in society are resulting in me feeling unwelcome, less safe, or less human, the first thing that came to my mind is the stereotype that I have on me because I'm a Mexican immigrant living in the United States. I came here 4 years ago seeking a better education, liberty, and happiness. In other words, seeking the American dream. James Truslow Adams stated, "Life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone with opportunity, for each according to ability and achievement." Over the past years, I've encountered people that as soon as they meet me, they say, "Oh, I didn't know you were Mexican," because Mexicans are dark skin color, or other stereotypes that I've heard are, all Mexicans are rapists, all Mexicans only eat tacos, all Mexicans wear sombreros, all Mexicans are drug dealers, all Mexicans are lazy, all Mexicans hop the border, and many more things. I'm not saying that we don't do these things. I'm saying that not all Mexicans do them. We like other food besides tacos. We can dress with different things that are not sombreros. And some of us are privileged enough to have a visa and travel without fear of being deported or even killed while crossing the border. There has always been this anti-immigrant sentiment, and the principal concerns expressed by those opposed to immigration are the perceived effects of economic costs, negative environmental impact from accelerated population growth, and increased crime rates. Well, I did some research on these concerns and found the following. The IHS, that stands for Immigration Health Surcharge, did a study of what would happen if immigration from Latin American countries to the United States stopped suddenly. The results showed that the country's workforce will not be enough to guarantee a sustained growth of the economy in the next 20 years. In the other hand, if the non-immigration matters could be unlocked, the U.S. economy will grow beyond what is expected today. This is the main conclusion of a study made by this global firm specialized in analysis and economic prospects. The so-called baby boomers, the generation that emerged from post-World War II demographic explosion, are reaching retirement age and have begun to leave the labor market. There is no native replacement generation that can fill the jobs that they are leaving. On the other hand, when they say that immigration increases crime rates, this is not true at all. Florida State University professor of criminology, Dr. Daniel Mears, said that good data focused on immigrant criminality, specifically undocumented immigrant criminality, is scarce. Dr. Daniel and others who studied this subject seem to agree that most research indicates immigrants actually commit crime at lower rates than native-born citizens. Immigrants are usually portrayed as violent criminals, but this is not representative of the millions of immigrants that are living in this country today. My response to these actions is love. By love, I mean the definition of love that Martin Luther King Jr. gave us. Agape means that we love another because God loves him or her. And I love and respect this country that has given me better opportunities than my own country. By love, I mean being myself and contributing in any positive way that I can to this country. I volunteer at a local animal shelter. I go to school and keep good grades. I get involved within my community. I pay my taxes, and of course, I follow the rules that are established in the United States. I will be forever grateful to everything this country has given me, and I will work hard enough to make sure I give it back to this beautiful country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana.
So second, I'd like to introduce Ms. Gwen Moliga. She is a junior here at CCSJ and an education major. So Ms. Moliga, please.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. Okay. To answer Dr. C's questions, in my opinion, my portrayal as other, the words, actions, and policies that create my feelings of being less safe and honestly seen as less human is a societal norm where we have allowed long-standing forms of repression for womankind. Women oppression is intentionally met with politicians in our current political arena who look to suppress our voices and ideas in many ways. We have a patriarchal government making important decisions about women's health care. We have unequal pay in the workforce, unequal representation and pay for women athletes, a government looking to strip funding from education, arts, and female-led industries to suffice for male-dominated jobs. Even worse, rape culture goes unchecked and is met with little to no punishment. These are the things that make me worry about myself, women, and young women in this world. I feel that the message being sent is that I am unable to make sound decisions about my body that I have grown up and learned over my 29 years of life. my hard work and work ethics will pretty much mean nothing and I will be paid less than a man. That the sanctity of my body will not be protected, it means nothing again because boys will be boys. And that attitude is backed by a president who doesn't mind grabbing women by the privates because he can. To give concrete examples, we have current situations with Senator Elizabeth Warren being silenced for trying to recite Coretta Scott King, a woman of color's voice on the floor during an important debate. Minority Leader Melissa Hortman was asked to apologize after stating facts because she called out her male colleagues who blatantly ignore women of the House's voice by being absent during their speeches. She said, and I quote, "I hate to break up the 100% white male card game in the meeting room, but I think this is an important debate." Women are constantly being pushed to the side and forcibly asked to be seen and not heard. This notion of being seen and not heard is not a government issue, or not just a government issue, but an issue with the male and female balance in the social order, where a man's dominance will drive everything and us as women will simply follow and never truly lead. It's sad, because I'm not just a woman, I'm a mother of a daughter, an athlete, a woman of color, a feminist, and by that, let me clarify that I care for equality for all sexes, not just female. And against my will, I am being subjected to the oppression with small chances of excusing myself from the nonsense. I'm in it regardless. Do I think we should love the people who do not feel women should have equal rights, freedoms, and means to do what we please? Yes, we should love those people. Because according to Dr. King, use love that isn't romanticized or a feeling of friendship, but of understanding that we are all created in God's image. Agape. Dr. King's definition is an understanding creative redemption for all men. His philosophy is that agape love seeks nothing in return, just to love them because God loves them. For my non-believers that want to look from a secular view, you can love them because you have a profound understanding for humans that inhabit this world and acknowledging that working together sustains and preserves life. Hate the system, hate the evil deeds, hate the injustice, but love the person. Is a nonviolent approach the right way to counter the injustices that we face with our current administration? Again, yes. Taking a nonviolent approach is not simply lie down and let others walk over you. It's the ability to stand in that person's face and still love them. It's standing courageously up for others without physical or negative means. We are morally beating our oppressors with attacking their conscience over and over again until it hits home. Women today are using nonviolent approaches to make changes. Though they are small now, its effects will be powerful. From the Million Woman March, women senators and House representatives speaking passionately on the House floor, even myself delivering this speech today that I would have never guessed I'd given, we are using our platforms to bring about changes to right so many wrongs against women in our politics and society today. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Ms. Tomika Alex Chavez. She is a criminal justice and psychology major here at CCSJ and a junior. So Ms. Chavez, please.
Hello everyone, can you all hear me fine? Sorry. I'm not fond of microphones. My speech may not be as intellectual as my fellow classmates and panelists because I just want to make it as short, sweet, simple, straight to the point. It's a combination of the two. I am of many backgrounds such as Mexican, Native American, and Black, so I'm a person of color greatly. Also, I may not be an immigrant, but I still am faced with that because the president does not see immigrants in that way. He just sees if they're a different color, then I'm going to find a way to deport you. So with that being said, my definition of love is what my family has taught me. It's something that you do unconditionally for the person. Obviously, we want to love those in a way that others aren't loved on a daily basis. That is what makes the world go around. So my approach to love in this case with somebody in a greater power that threatens me is that of Malcolm X. I will not stand by and try to understand why this person does not like me simply because I'm not the same color as that person. That's so medieval time. We are in the 21st century. We have evolved. Why not be greater? Sadly, history likes to repeat itself. I am in the military, and although Donald Trump says he has all these great plans for the military, saying, oh, we're going to, as soon as I get into office, I'm going to go and attack ISIS, I'm going to do this and that, I'm going to do all these kinds of things, but he doesn't know anything about the military in general. He has had 5 deferments, so why send other people's children out to fight a war that you know nothing about? You are so ignorant to everything around you. You've been coddled your life. You were given $1 million as a start-off point. That's pretty great. I don't know what I do with that, but to say that you started from nothing from $1 million, come on, that's ridiculous. With that being said, he also wants to do an additional up-price budget from previous President Obama's cap on the military defense by 3%. So that's over $500 billion that we're going to invest into the military. And his theory behind this is because he wants to make it known to other countries that, you know, we're a force to reckon with. We don't need that 3% budget added. We're already a force to be reckoned with. Nobody has started an initial bomb you, I'll bomb back war. So his ideal for that is just barbaric. And with this being said, he wants to take a 30% cut from the State Department and foreign aid. Foreign aids, if we were to cut that off, that would bring down our military dramatically. We get help from our allies, so if we cut that off, he really just wants it to make just an American fleet, which would be destroying one of the best powerful military structures ever. So he's not really thinking, he's just trying to place things in what he thinks is great, and he's not doing any background with this. Congress are urging him to not go through with this bill because 120 retired generals and admirals are saying, we need our allies, we need this to stay on top of the game. But Donald Trump likes to see it differently. And back to being a person of color, I'm also part of the LGBT community, so I'm attacked already. The lovely vice president is the face for that discrimination itself. He's that nice big face platter of it. But it was pretty fearful when President-elect Donald Trump at the time was running to become the president, because a lot of people were joking around, you know, saying, oh, well, if you're going to Africa, I'm going right with you, or if I'm going to Mexico, let me go too. But even though I have joked around about that too, in a sense, I was a little scared because the power that he can have and the power that he's shown so far right now, just from simple, I don't want to say bigot, but not so intellectual people who are just saying, yeah, you know, that's what I've been thinking all this time, so I'm just going to vote for you. They're not doing their research. He's trying to divide a country that does not need to be divided. Dividing us would be the worst possible thing for him to do. Since he's been president, I know about 3 people who have been personally attacked because of their sexual orientation. Myself, because I'm not easily targeted and people surprisingly don't see that, I'm happy to be in a community or in a state that is open with it, that isn't as discriminative with it, because there are other people in different states and smaller societies and groups who are targeted because it is, you know, it's not the norm over there. But you have to realize we are progressing. President Obama at the time allowed all 50, you know, all the states to be having legal marriage, but Donald Trump wants to debunk all that. He doesn't want that to happen. He's allowing some companies to allow people of the LGBT community to not be hired simply because of who they love. So in my point, I cannot love somebody who will discriminate me just because of who I love or who I care for. And that's it.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to all three of our student panelists for your very intelligent, clear, and thought-provoking comments. So now we kind of get to the heart of the matter. So I laid down some of the scaffolding for us philosophically, right? About this idea of love in the political sense. And we've just heard from three students at CCSJ who are giving their own interpretations of this based on their own experience. Now it's time to kind of have a larger discussion about this idea of how does this term love function in the political sphere. So questions for myself, for any of our panelists? Amy, please.
So particularly for you, so for really all of you, maybe even including you, I would say, what are you going to do about it? Like, you said, for Alex, you pointed out that love is not your solution, like not the action you're going to take. So what are you going to do?
Me going first, personally, for myself, in order to retaliate, so to speak, is to continue being the person that I am. I'm not simply going to stop and hide, go back to the closet, so to speak, just because I have somebody in power who is trying to write me off as another. I refuse to do that. We have progressed, so why do I want to regress? That's not the smart thing to do in life. So I refuse to stand down and not be who I am today simply because this person is trying to he's trying to be an oppressor for everyone. I refuse to do that.
And I'll answer to kind of counter Alex. As far as what I'm going to do, something like that, because of the situation that we're in and even previously, it's the reason why I even came back to college. Education is key. Anything that's happening, any form of ignorance, any form of oppression, it's usually because there's a lack of education. I went from banking to becoming a teacher out of nowhere. And why? Because I saw that there's more to life than just numbers. There's more to life than just, opening accounts. I saw that there's people, adults that I would interact on a daily basis who you couldn't do nothing for. They already were set in their ways. So my goal to change that is to become a teacher and to educate our young